Sometimes there are movies that you just cannot get away from, no matter how hard you try to get away from the hype. And my film this year that I cannot escape is people talking about Together. Together is a new body horror movie starring Alison Brie and Dave Franco. This movie by Australian writer-director Michael Shanks is about Tim and Millie who find themselves at a crossroads in their relationship when they move to the countryside. And as tensions begin to rise, they have an encounter with an unnatural force which threatens their very being. Somehow I have avoided the trailer, but everyone is talking about Together, everyone. And with body horror being so favored right now by horror directors and horror fans, I can't wait to watch this film and see if it lives up to all of the hype. I've heard it's funny, I've heard it's gross and very wild and shocking. I hope it is gory. That's what I want. And I love that it's a real life couple, Alison Brie and Dave Franco, who have been married since 2017. It should be really interesting to see their chemistry within these roles. Is this the new great body horror of 2025? I'm gonna find out and let you know spoiler free whether it's worth your time and worth running to the cinema because the hype is real. Let's go check out Together. I'm gonna walk to the cinema, so walk with me and then we'll come back and chat about it. I don't live far from the cinema we're going to today. Let's go. Hello friends, hello. I just got out of Together. It ended 10 minutes ago. Well, look, that movie is solid. There's no doubt about it. It was a great film, really well done, and it has a lot of heart and soul, which I wasn't quite expecting. I thought that the movie was gonna be more about codependency in a way, just with the title and some of the imagery, but it definitely was a lot more modern and truthful than I was expecting, so it hit me in a very different way. It is a really well-constructed movie about modern relationships, which is nice because it's kind of a departure from having a lot of horrors, I'm gonna say, about grief, and it touches on a lot of different emotions, mental health. There's just so much going on in terms of the characters, which made them really well-rounded. And although the way it came together was interesting and satisfying, I found a lot of it to be quite predictable. And I don't think that's necessarily a bad thing. It was quite satisfying, but I felt the breadcrumbs in this movie were very heavy. And it did take me out of some of the elements. Just my own personal perspective, obviously, on that. But the performances, the layering, and the interesting direction, it has such soul and comes from a deep place of truth, and especially with millennial relationships, I think it really reflects a lot of what we haven't seen in movies but seems so obvious, which I thought was really cool and fresh. And I think that's it. It felt like such a fresh perspective on something that we have seen in other movies touched on, but not in this specific way. So it made it quite special and unique in its feeling and vibe and tone. But in terms of the way that the film flowed, which I do think actually was unique, but I think the elements which connects it all and the actual overarching story and the objects, meanings, and elements within that, I felt myself realizing the whole way through what was happening, which is very obvious. From the start, you understand they set up the film very obviously, but there were no surprises in this film for me, which I'm having a hard time with because on one hand, I feel like it goes an obvious path because maybe it is so truthful and speaks to me in certain ways. And so I kind of liked that it was satisfying, but I was hoping that there was gonna be some moments that would really shock me, and I just didn't feel it as much as I thought. So for that, with the hype, because that's how we started this video, I think that people should be very excited for this film. It's a solid film, do not get me wrong, it is completely solid. I love the way it came together. But although the perspective is very fresh and unique, its elements and the way it's structured is something that's quite familiar to us. So it's more of a satisfying film than really a wild and wacky, crazy film, which you gotta also take that with a grain of salt because I watch a lot of wacky, crazy films, which you guys do too. But I just don't think it's as wild, insane, jaw-dropping as people have kind of made it out to be. But I'm not saying that's a bad thing. I'm just saying in terms of like the body horror and also the gore elements, I was hoping for a little bit more. So that's really weird to say. Let's back it up to the start. The film is about a couple who are at a crossroad. I think that was the best way of saying it, at a crossroads in their relationship. And their relationship has this certain pressure on it. And there is a weird dynamic. They've been together for a long time and it's kind of coming to a point where they have to decide if they are serious about it. And there is so much unsaid between the characters, but I feel like it reigns true. And I think that this is where I felt the casting was a very interesting choice, because although it's great to have a real life couple who are very comfortable with each other and obviously could go through the roles and create the characters in such depth together, there is no way that they are this couple. And so I felt, especially with Alison Brie's character, I obviously don't know her in real life, but I feel like their real life dynamic would be so different to how it is in this film. So I think the chemistry I was hoping to see them come together and make during this movie is kind of absent, because they have to play out these kind of conflicts between them and this rising tension. So it's not this comfortability, you know what I mean? So I thought that was really interesting having them throughout that and thinking about that kind of dynamic. But I do think it's a very vulnerable role for both of them, showing the flaws in their characters. And that's what I guess I found so realistic about this movie, is they weren't afraid to really touch on some certain elements that a lot of people talk about in modern dating. We're seeing more and more films that aren't trying to just emulate the same stories, just reinterpret the same ideas in other horror movies. Now we're seeing actual characters that reflect like modern day society and how people are. It sounds very straightforward, but sometimes people go to the movie for escapism. They want to see elements of what they're going through in real life, but they don't want to see themselves too much in characters too painfully. And I think that the flaws within these characters are painful. And I really like that element. It brought a lot of realism to the movie. The cinematography is really where I feel like the fresh perspective with the director also comes out. Obviously, that's the whole camera department, but the way that the film is put together, I was really impressed with the contrast and darkness of the movie. I don't know why, but when I heard there was a movie with Alison Brie and Dave Franco, I thought it was gonna be this kind of not popcorn horror, but a brighter version of what this is. And it really does go a little bit darker and a little bit more gritty. And you can see that come out through textures throughout the film. It was actually filmed, I was looking it up afterwards when I was walking home. It's filmed in Australia. So it's a complete Australian film, but because they go to the countryside, it's more of like a woodland kind of landscape. And I felt it was a lot more darker than I expected or kind of like pictured in my mind. I obviously hadn't watched any trailers. And so when it opens up with that quite darkness, I was wondering how the comedy and I guess the tone and those elements were going to come through. So I was quite surprised to see it done in very subtle ways. So I think it's just a really interesting balance of reigning true to people and hitting on a nerve with a lot of people. I think a lot of people are going to see themselves in different parts of this. So I felt like the emotional connection to this film was greater for me than I wouldn't say horror side. I think that there was a lot of amazing horror elements throughout, and the scares were varied. They definitely had a jump scare that got me, but they do it in a very shrieking violin aesthetic. Very dark and very nightmarish. The editing for that worked really well, and it just felt like a fresh take on horror, even though it's combining all of these elements that we've seen over and over again. I guess I could see a film like this being completely different and more digestible or broad for a bigger audience if it had a different director, but it just seems so specific, and I really liked the niche of it. The tone was very different. It was funny in parts, but funny in a haha, that's true kind of way. There are some, offhanded jokes, but I've seen just so many headlines or quotes saying it was like disgusting and so funny, and I just didn't see that as strong, or I guess get that as strongly as other people. I think that the characters and the layers and the depth throughout all of that, the way it looks and the scares was spot on. The gore I could have used a little bit more of. I felt like it cut away at parts where I was ready to see more. But I guess with an independent film, they're doing what they're able to do. They do show a lot. I don't want to play it down too much. I've just watched a lot of body horror lately. And I felt like it was very predictable, the beats that it hit. I think it was different to what I expected because of the cast and having such big names attached to it, which is dumb to say. It was very dumb of me because this is the first feature from the writer-director. It is an independent film. So it does have a really grounded approach. And I think that that made it so it was so out of Hollywood and the characters were so much more real. I know I've said that, but I just felt a lot more real than I was expecting, and I really enjoyed that about the movie. I was just a little bit disappointed that I picked everything that was gonna happen throughout the movie with the heavy breadcrumbs. I do want to say, just to mention, the director for this film, well, it's more actually Alison Brie and Dave Franco, allegedly facing a copyright infringement because another filmmaker claims that it is a ripoff of a 2023 independent film called Better Half. But the director did come out with a statement, and I'll let that speak for itself if you want to go and read that. I will link that down below. In his statement, he basically says that he has documentation for dates and when different scripts and different drafts were put out that contained similar scenes before this film was made, or, you know, at the same time. Anyway, I just thought we would address that. I am very aware of that, and it will be interesting to see how that transpires. Overall, I think that the characters really pulled me through this one, and the acting is superb. Is very vulnerable, and it's really cool to see some bigger name actors take on horror. I think after Demi Moore, a lot of people are very excited to put I mean, a lot of people have always done this, but I think a lot more actors are turning towards horror, and especially body horror, fearlessly, and the fact that they can work with more independent artists or independent filmmakers, I love. I really enjoyed this movie. It was very layered emotionally, but in terms of reveals and predictability, it was pretty straightforward for me, but still a very fun, scary, and slightly gory ride. I'm gonna give this one a personal score of 8 out of 10. For scare score, I'm going to give it a 6. There were some great moments. I'm gonna give it a gore score. Someone asked me to do this the other day, so I'm gonna do it for this film because it's body horror as well. So for gore, I would still give it a solid 7. I know I said it wasn't that gory, but I was just expecting more because of the hype. And hopefully, if anything, I'm lowering your expectations in terms of gore so you enjoy it more. And for originality, I'm going to give it an 8. I think the way that it came together was really fresh, and you won't be sorry about seeing a different perspective if you're into that. I can't wait to hear what you guys think about Together. Have you seen it already? Let me know down below what you thought. Let me know your opinion and your scores. I would love to hear them. And hopefully this let you know that the hype for this film, I get it, but I don't think it's as crazy as everyone's saying. I thought I was really gonna come out thinking it was the most wild thing ever from all of the hype, but you know, hype is great. I want people to be excited, and I love that people love this film. So there is no shame and shade towards anyone who thinks that this is the most bonkers ride ever. I hope you're all having a great day. If you wanna check out my favorite top 10 of this year so far, it's right here. It's my perspective and it's right here. I would love to hear yours as well. And also, if you missed it, I did a wrap up of everything I watched last month. If you want to go through with me, I have a lot of recommendations and a lot of suggestions of what maybe to miss. I'll talk to you all very soon. Stay safe and stay spooky. Bye, friends.